0345 6060 973.
10 minutes before 8, we'll come back to our conversation. The spare will be there, the Duke of Sussex, to attend his father's coronation in just weeks' time. But let's pause and think there's probably been, we'd all agree, too many negative headlines about police and policing in recent weeks and or months. So what about one that I read today, that changes will save officers hundreds of thousands of hours of pen pushing and make them, as in the police, to fight crime? That's what the headlines say. Let's get more details on that from Conservative MP in Croydon South and Crime and Policing Minister Chris Philp, who joins me now. Appealing headlines, and indeed you have a first-person piece in today's Daily Telegraph. What exactly are you and your colleagues announcing today? Good morning, Minister.
Good morning, Nick. Well, when I was first appointed police minister a few months ago, one of the first things I heard from frontline police officers was a frustration that huge amounts of their time were getting taken up by essentially form-filling and bureaucracy, which was preventing them spending the time they wanted supporting victims, protecting the public and catching criminals. So I dug a bit deeper into this. I worked with Chief Constable Chris Rowley, he's the Chief Constable of Lancashire, and the National Police Chiefs Council lead for crime recording to dig into this a bit more. He came up with some recommendations a few weeks ago to reduce the bureaucratic burdens without obviously undermining policing or the investigation of crime. I've accepted his recommendations and we're announcing them today, and we're going to get them implemented within the next few weeks. And essentially what this does is firstly remove the requirement to record multiple different crimes in relation to a single incident, which was taking up huge amounts of police time. Secondly,
just break me down for that for a minute. Can you sort of give my listeners something to hang on to? What do you mean by a single incident? Is this some kind of violent attack or a demo, or what might we be looking at?
Well, it could be, for example, an incident where there's somebody's reported, domestic abuse, and there's a number of elements to that, which might be malicious communications, it might be harassment, it might be stalking, a number of elements. Now, previously, there were each one of those elements got recorded in a separate record that took, hours and hours and hours to create. So we're going to still record all of that, but just in a single crime record. And by doing it, it's called the Principal Crime Rule, which actually was in place for all offences until 2017. And by reverting back to the way it was done up to 2017, it means all of these duplicate records don't need to be created and it can all be recorded under one record. It sounds like a technical change, but it saves, as you said, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hours of police time each year that can instead be spent looking after victims and catching criminals. There's also a concern that some of these malicious communications allegations of people putting something that on Twitter or whatever that people take offence at gets recorded as a crime. Now, some of those, might meet the criminal threshold, but most of them don't, and that doesn't need to be recorded. That'll save a lot of time. And there are other cases of things like reports of a disturbance in a pub car park after chucking out time. When the police turn up, there's no victim. When the police turn up, there's no one there. Does that really need to be recorded with all the additional time that creates? So those sort of changes together will save, according to the police, 443,000 hours of police time each year, nearly 500,000 hours of police time that can instead be spent supporting victims, keeping the public safe and catching criminals, which I think is what the public want to see the police spending their time doing.
Minister, how will we know if this initiative has worked, would you say?
Well, I think the first thing is we'll see that those 500,000 hours getting spent on the activities I just mentioned.
How will they be reflected for the benefit of my listeners and your constituents? What will they physically see? More people being nicked, more crimes being solved? What would it be?
Yeah, well, the outputs that I would hope to see, the outcomes I'd hope to see would be, more visible police because they can be on the streets not filling in forms. I'd expect to see more arrests getting made. I'd expect to see more charges and more prosecutions. And of course, all of this goes hand in hand with the police recruitment programme that concluded a couple of weeks ago on the 31st of March. Now, we're going to get the figures officially announced, I think, on the 26th of April in a couple of weeks' time. But I believe we're on track to deliver a record number of police officers, more police officers in England and Wales than we've ever had at any time in history. So a combination of these two things, record police officer numbers together with cutting bureaucracy, should mean more visible police, more support for victims and more criminals getting arrested.
OK. I mean, all I would say is, and you've not been policing minister for all this time, we've had a look back at the last 12 months of various promises in the world of crime, field of crime from this government. And again, you're not responsible. And these are headlines taken from the own government website. They're no national newspapers. The 11th of April, new crackdown on fraud introduced by the Home Office. New crackdown to prevent illegal migrants accessing bank accounts. Action plan to crack down on antisocial behaviour. Domestic abusers face crackdown in raft of new measures. Government announces crackdown against organised criminal gangs. Government targets bomb-making materials and poisons in new crackdown. There's 8 crackdowns, and there are many, many more. I won't bore you. My point is, all these crackdowns, none of my listeners feel any safer.
Well, if you look at the... Well, actually, if you look at the data, right, the Crime Survey of England and Wales is the only source of crime data that's approved by the Office for National Statistics. And if you look at overall crime since 2010... excluding fraud and computer misuse, which only came into the figures more recently, crime as experienced by the public has gone down by 50%. I think violence has gone down by 39%. Residential burglary has gone down by 56%. These are substantial decreases in crime over the last 13 years. And over the last 3 years, I think since December 2019, overall crime reported by the Crime Survey has gone down by 12%. So crime has reduced significantly. But there is obviously a lot more I want to do as a relatively newly appointed police minister, hence the announcements today.
But the news that came out earlier this week will particularly resonate with you as a London MP, that we have an epidemic of mobile phones being stolen in this city, and I'm sure in major cities up and down the country as well. In London, one is stolen every 6 minutes, and the recovery rate, Minister, is at 1.9%. How would you describe those figures, and what are you and your colleagues going to do about it?
Yeah, well, I'm concerned, deeply concerned by those figures as a Londoner, and as you say, it probably applies in other cities as well. That's precisely why we're recruiting all these extra police officers, and and once they're all through their training, being able to protect the streets to prevent these crimes happening in the first place, and then follow up afterwards.
Do you think they follow up sufficiently now, Minister? Do you think they follow up is sufficient?
Well, I think there's more we can do, to be absolutely honest, Nick. And that one of the reasons why I was keen to sort out these problems with the bureaucracy and the form filling and to lift that burden off policing is to free up time to spend on follow-up. And so once we've done this, one of the challenges I'll be putting to policing is to say that with all the extra police officers, with the removal of these bureaucratic burdens, which are worth nearly 500,000 hours a year, I expect, and the public expects, obviously more visible policing, which is preventative and it reassures the public, and I expect more to be done on follow-up. So that's what I'm expecting of policing in return for the investment that we've made and for removing some of these bureaucratic burdens, which is, frankly, been wasting their time.
On the subject of policing, just one other one before we move on to other matters. Does it take 5 officers to take away a collection of golly dolls from a pub in Essex?
Well, look, I mean, police are operationally independent. I'm not going to comment on whether Essex police were right or not on that.
So you think it might require 5 officers?
No, I'm not. Look, the police are operationally independent.
Well, it's a yes or no, Minister, isn't it? There was no resistance offered by the publicans. There was no resistance offered by any of the clients or customers in the pub, but 5 officers were scrambled to a pub in Grays, Essex, to remove a collection of golly dolls. I understand the potential offensive nature of golly dolls. I've got that. But I ask again, does it take 5 coppers to do that, Policing Minister?
Well, look... Look, they're operationally independent. It's up to the police to decide how they deploy their resources. I'm not going to offer a running commentary or critique.
I'm not asking for a running commentary, Minister. I'm just saying, does it take 5 men or women to take a collection of golly dolls away? And you don't seem able to answer yes or no. I find that astonishing.
What? No, I'm not going to answer because they're operationally independent and it's up to the police to decide how they respond to incidents, not up to me to tell them what to do or to offer comments after the event. That's what being operationally independent means. Front
page news today. I'm pleased to see that the Duke of Sussex will attend the coronation of his father in a few weeks' time. Noting, of course, that there are security concerns over the Duke of Sussex, given his recent book concerning his deployment in Afghanistan. What does that do to the security measures required, Minister?
Well, those obviously get assessed on a case-by-case basis. There's a huge policing operation being put around the coronation, as you can imagine, both in terms of policing the streets and obviously other issues that you can imagine as well, to make sure the coronation happens safely. And the police did a fantastic job of policing Her Late Majesty's funeral back in September, and we're going to work to make sure we have a similar successful operation when His Majesty the King is crowned in in a few weeks' time.
How much has been added to the cost by the confirmation that the Duke of Sussex will attend?
Well, I haven't seen any updated plan, so I don't know the answer to that question. But we're going to make sure that everybody involved in the coronation, including the general public, are kept safe, obviously.
Right, OK, but it will be an additional cost. We'll need more blokes or women now, won't we? With the Duke of Sussex being the target, sadly, that he is.
Well, I'm not going to get into people's individual protection arrangements, but we're going to. By the way, we're providing protection for hundreds of foreign heads of state, overseas heads of state who are attending as well. It's a huge policing operation, both in terms of the streets and obviously protection for individuals. So it's a big operation, and we're hoping and expecting and planning for it to be as successful as the operation was back in September of last year.
All right, final question, a more broad question, certainly as regards the Home Office. One former Navy Admiral, described yesterday as the boating season now as regards Channel crossings. This, as we learn, there's been a sharp increase in the cases of diphtheria. What is the Home Office doing to monitor the cases of people arriving who might have that troubling condition?
Yes, I think when people arrive illegally by small boat, they're given a sort of full interview. An assessment is made about their health. I know in the past when we had issues with COVID, there was screening done for COVID. So that assessment gets done. They're obviously able to access the GP system once they arrive here as well to make sure that they are get whatever inoculations they may need and whatever treatment they may need.
Do we test the arrivals for diphtheria?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'd have to ask the immigration minister
noting there has been an increase, and this comes to the European Society of Clinical Microbiology and Infectious Diseases, a snappy little organisation, but in the light of the news that sadly the number of cases is increasing drastically, do we not need to look at possibly giving these folks diphtheria checks so obviously we can make them better while we assess their cases? Minister?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's something I'm sure the immigration minister is going to give consideration to. We're looking at the evidence. But I think the key point here is what the Prime Minister has said, is we want to stop these crossings in the first place. These crossings by boat from France are illegal and they are totally unnecessary because France is a safe country. There's no war going on in France. Nobody needs to flee France for their safety. And that's why the Prime Minister is absolutely right to say his intention, his plan is to stop these crossings completely. And that's what he's working on doing with the new legislation going through Parliament.
Grateful for your time. Crime and Policing Minister Chris Philp appearing here on LBC. Thank you, Minister. 2 minutes after 8, let's get the latest news headlines.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, royal sources say the King has welcomed Prince Harry's decision to attend next month's coronation. It remains unclear exactly what role the Duke of Sussex will play in the event, as his trip to the UK is expected to be a flying visit. Meghan and the couple's children will stay in California. It's reported Buckingham Palace officials were not expecting Harry to attend, but historian Sir Anthony Selden isn't surprised.
It would have been pretty unthinkable and almost unknown in history for the second son not to attend the father's coronation. So it looks like they've managed by hook or by crook to actually come up with a solution.
A man is due to appear in court charged with the murder of a police officer in West Yorkshire in 2005. Pirandita Khan, who is 74, has been extradited from Pakistan in connection with the death